So there's one book that I'm constantly recommending to people who are interested in learning new skills, and it's not one of the ones that you ever see on lists of books about self-improvement. And the name of that book is 9 out of 10 Climbers Make the Same Mistakes. It's written by a guy called Dave McLeod, and for those who don't know him, Dave is one of the best climbers in the entire world. Just to give you an idea, in 2006 he climbed a route called Rhapsody on Dumbarton Rock in Scotland, which at the time was one of the hardest traditional climbing routes in the world. And he was also the first climber in the world to climb free solo style, so that's without a rope, a 5.14B route, which, if you know about anything about climbing, is extremely impressive. If you've seen Alex Honnold's free solo, it's harder than the El Cap route that he did, so that gives you an idea. So today I'm going to talk about why I think everyone should read that book if they're interested in learning new skills, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've applied the lessons in it to disciplines that are way outside climbing, like piano and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So it is a book about climbing, and there's a lot of climbing-specific information in there, and that kind of makes it a shorter read. You don't need to be worrying about how to keep the pads of your fingers healthy, or finger strength, or tendonitis, or dieting, or anything like that. But there are kind of 4 key points in the book that I come back to every time I learn a new skill, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. And those are trying 4% harder, getting to the flat bit of the curve, thinking outside the sport, and building the athlete mindset. So the central message of the book is that climbers are stuck on the basics but lost in the details, or kind of to put it another way, everyone's focusing on a few small tiny details when what they should be looking at is the big fundamentals that they haven't quite mastered yet. And Dave kind of goes on to say that the problem for most climbers has changed. It used to be that it was very difficult to get good quality information about climbing, and now there's just this enormous sea of information about climbing and different tricks, different tools, all this stuff that you could try, making it very, very difficult to know what you should be focusing on. That's probably pretty familiar in whatever you're learning. I remember reading a book by Marcelo Garcia, who's like arguably the greatest jiu-jitsu guy of all time. And in that book, he says that when he came up in jiu-jitsu, like he would get one magazine a month, and it would have a picture in, no instructionals at all, and he would spend the whole month poring over like a picture of a position or a choke, trying to work out how he would get there, what he would do if he was in that position, how he might escape from that position. And that was the only resource he had. Now there are just thousands and thousands of resources if you're a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy. There are 100 different guys offering courses. There are people saying, you know, oh, take my exercise regime, do this, do that. And it's very difficult to know what to focus on. So piano's been around for hundreds of years, but there are new tools coming out to help you improve it all the time. And are any of them more valuable than what already exists? That's kind of a decision you have to make, and all of that takes time and energy. So the first passage of the book that I absolutely love is one called The Truth About Famous Climbers. It comes down to this: 4% less effort does not get you 4% less results. Often 4% less effort gets you 90% less results. The return on making that little extra effort is vastly out of proportion with the extra work required. Multiply this across all the disparate aspects of climbing performance, and 4% extra in each one delivers a windfall of results that lifts you over huge barriers of performance. There are a million examples of how this plays out in practice. Each single one seems trivial, but taken together the effect explains why the best manage what they do and you don't. So that sounds kind of simple, and it's like, oh, so I just have to try a little bit harder. But the point Dave makes is that trying a little bit harder isn't something that you can just do a little bit for a couple of weeks. It's something that you have to internalize and do in your practice the whole time. It works across something like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Maybe you take the time to do an extra 10 reps of a move you're really trying to nail at the end of a session, but you do it every session for weeks and weeks and months and years. Or maybe in piano, the difference is that every day you spend 2 minutes on a drill that you really need to practice, like a big octave jump or a scale that you're not quite getting right yet. The point is that it's not a quick fix, but if you stick to it, the results of trying 4% harder really compound over weeks and months and years to make you vastly better at any skill than you otherwise would be. So one of the most interesting things that McLeod talks about is getting into the flat bit of the curve. I think everybody kind of has an idea of what a learning curve looks like by now. You don't improve at anything in a linear way. It's more of like an initially steep progression and then things taper off. So what becomes really useful is when you see that this relationship kind of happens in every subset of abilities that make up your overall ability in any discipline. So you can be at different places on the learning curve for like footwork, mental toughness, finger strength, your repertoire of different moves. In jiu-jitsu, like you might be overall blue belt level at jiu-jitsu, but your attack might be purple belt level while your defense is still white belt level. Or you can kind of subdivide it even further down. Like maybe your submissions are amazing, but your back game is weak. Maybe you've got great side control, but your mount is really bad. I know this doesn't make a lot of sense if you're not already a little bit au fait with jiu-jitsu. In piano, I think it's slightly different because like jiu-jitsu is a competitive sport where if you have a weakness, people will find that weakness and exploit it in competition. Whereas in piano, you can kind of avoid your weakness by just not doing the stuff you don't want to do. But if you want to be a good pianist, you still need to worry about things like music theory, ear training, like improvisational ability. There's a lot of different things you can subdivide down to. And just because you're overall good at a thing, it's still worth digging into what your weaknesses might be in that thing. So I think a really useful thing to do is take whatever discipline you're interested in, subdivide it as much as you can, then maybe even further subdivide those subdivisions into all the areas that you could possibly improve on. So I went away and looked at my jiu-jitsu performance, and I realized that I'm quite good at kimuras, which are a kind of arm lock. I'm okay at arm triangles. I was absolutely terrible at chokes from the back. I just wasn't ever doing them. So that was something that, you know, I was probably at a white belt level at. As soon as I improved that, I could suddenly attack from more positions. I was suddenly like a better, more threatening guy at jiu-jitsu generally. The next most important lesson that I found in the book is kind of the opposite of this. Is that instead of trying to subdivide like little bits of the sport, the specific skill you're doing more and more, it's kind of how do you look outside of that? Like what kind of lifestyle factors can you change? You probably have a larger degree of control than you think over lifestyle factors that might be having a huge impact on your life. So maybe just drinking an extra liter of water every day is going to make a huge difference to how you feel at jiu-jitsu, your recovery from hard training sessions that lets you do another session, maybe sleeping a bit better or a bit more, switching Netflix off half an hour earlier at night is going to have a dramatic impact on your ability to concentrate when you finally hit the piano. Maybe eating a little bit better is going to help your concentration. Even if you can only get to a specific training session for your sport once or twice a week, there are things you can kind of do to maximize your time while you're there. And again, it's worth sitting down and working out what changes you can make to your lifestyle to make you better at whatever it is you're passionate about. Maybe it's making time for active recovery or stretching. Maybe it's making sure you're eating well every day. Maybe it's learning to cook so that you can eat better. These are the kind of things you have to think about. It's not just what you do when you sit down to practice, it's everything outside that. Okay, so finally I'm going to talk about the athlete mindset. So the basic idea of the athlete mindset is to move away from needing validation in the form of things you can't control, like winning competitions, and then move towards getting your validation from small daily successes that you can control, and really learning to love the grind. This is something that McLeod points out. Top athletes do. Every athlete has to do this. If you can't learn to love the grind, you're never going to be a high performer in anything you do. McLeod talks about the athlete mindset as a willingness to do what others won't, a love of the grind and the determined perseverance of long, drawn-out, seemingly unrewarding years of training, embracing setbacks, getting thwarted, getting beaten back, having a positive relationship to failures, letting them bring out the best in you, and what McLeod calls a love of suffering. So the whole point is that you get your validation from controlling the things you can control. So if you showed up to the gym, if you did the warm-up that you were supposed to do, if you did the drills that you were supposed to do, then all of those things count as a success. It doesn't matter whether you're winning the competitions or getting a PB every week. The point is that you're putting in the work. And if you do put in the work, the results will kind of naturally follow. And I think it's something that the more you do it, the more you will see the value in it. So, for instance, I started playing scales as soon as I started playing piano. I played them every day, and now I'm pretty good at scales. And so when I start learning a new skill, like at the moment, I'm practicing the walking bass and the piano, and I'm building that up, and it's coming very, very, very slowly. But I do it every day. I try and get a tiny bit better every day. I change something I'm doing. I do it without looking, or I try and up the metronome a little bit, but I know that the results will come if I put the work in over the long term. And the more you do that, the more you embrace the grind, the more you will come to learn to love the grind. And that's super important for anything you want to get better at. Okay, so how do you pull all these things together? Well, this is where I think something that Seth Godin calls the dip comes in. McLeod explains it a little bit like this. In your first steps in learning a new skill, any strategy brings immediate improvement every session until the dip happens. The term neatly describes the huge gulf between the end of that initial rush of improvement and hard-won mastery. Tiny improvements seem to take forever to occur once you get past the initial rush of learning the basics, and when the improvements do happen, they're inconsistent, And there might be long periods when that particular component skill falls short of a previous high point. So the point McLeod makes is that when you're in the middle of the dip, it's kind of natural to doubt yourself and to question what you're doing and consider quitting and switching to doing another thing. The beginner's progress has gone away and mastery seems like a long way away. But the point is, if you know that you're on the right path, if you're doing the right stuff, if you're following a good program, you have to stick with it. If you're actively seeking out the things that you're worst at and attacking them every day or every training session, then you will improve and you will make progress. So I think it's pretty clear by now that I really think you should read the whole book. It's full of great advice, but if I was to try and condense its lessons down to just a few, it would be the ones I've mentioned. So just to recap, that means trying 4% harder, just looking for those little spaces where a little extra bit of effort can make the difference. Think about getting to the flat bit of the curve in as many different things as you can. That means sitting down and looking at the thing you're trying to learn and dividing it into as many different areas as you can, and then working out which ones you can make the fastest improvements at. That means working on the things you neglect, which are probably not going to be the things you like very much. That's why you've been neglecting them. But you'll improve at them the fastest and they will bring your overall performance up. Think about places outside the skill you want to learn where you could improve. So maybe that means going to bed a little bit earlier so you get better quality sleep. Maybe it means drinking more water, eating a little bit better, dealing with sources of stress in your life so that when it comes time to practice, you're ready to practice hard. And finally, think about yourself like an athlete. You need an athlete's mindset. You need to look at the little wins that you can get on a day-to-day basis by following the plan, by doing what you're supposed to. You can't rely on the big markers of progress like playing a concert for your friends or winning a competition to keep you motivated, because those things might not happen, and if they do happen, they might not happen for a long time. Look at daily practice as the way to get your wins in, build up that grit and think like an athlete. And that is it. 9 out of 10 climbers make the same mistakes. Great book. I cannot recommend it enough. I recommend you check out Dave McLeod. He's amazing. Please do like and subscribe. Every subscription helps me do more of these videos. I will speak to you soon, guys. Good training.